In the heart of Houston, before the spotlight, before the crowds, and before jiu-jitsu and MMA became what they are today. Long before the wave ever reached the city or even the country, there was a Houston OG putting in the work. Jeff Messina's journey started back in 1997 under Saul Solis, in an era where training was raw, relentless, and unforgiving. From those early days, he stepped into rooms with some of the sport's most respected names, helping fighters prepare for the biggest stages in the world, from UFC to Pride. But it was his trip to Rio de Janeiro that changed everything, where he immersed himself in jiu-jitsu at its source, learning, evolving, and finding the path that would define his life. Under the legendary Rodrigo Monderos, he earned his black belt and began building something of his own. Today, he is a 4th-degree black belt, a coach who has developed high-level competitors and world champions, a lifelong student of the art, a teacher, and a leader in the jiu-jitsu community. At Revolution Dojo, the story doesn't stop, it evolves through everyone that steps on his mats. At the center of it all, our guest, Jeff Messina. This is his story. Let's get into it. So, all right, well, let's get this started.
Let's go.
I'm glad you're here. Man, we started off with a banger. This is the very first podcast that F4 has been, that we're producing. And Jeff Messina as the first one, man, that's a real good
guest.
So for people who don't know your story, what brought you to jiu-jitsu?
All right. Well, first of all, it's a huge honor to be here and to be your first guest. I hope it's a good one. People like it and share it. Well, I first started jiu-jitsu. My first introduction to it was like many guys in our age group was the UFC, which I believe was 93 or 94. I saw it on pay-per-view. At the time, I was living in New Mexico, and I grew up like always liking martial arts, but I never did any. Like my mom wouldn't let me go sign up. My uncle got really hurt in karate. He got to like brown belt and ended up with like an aneurysm. They found out way later, so there was no way. So like me and my buddies would get like ninja books and karate books and like create little clubs and throw ninja stars at our house and just spar in the grass and just but never had real training, you know. Like through high school and in early adulthood, I lived in New Mexico and I was around a lot of rough guys, so got in a lot of fights and this and that. But the UFC came out and it was just like mind-boggling, you know, just like to see the different style versus style. And then this guy Royce Gracie came in wearing a gi, doing this Brazilian jiu-jitsu stuff that none of like the world has never really seen, you know, and a smaller guy taking guys down or even pulling guard or whatever and submitting guys. And I was like, damn, that is dope, man. I really want to learn that one day. But at that time, there was nothing where I lived. So I kind of forgot about it. A couple UFCs more came out. And then I moved back to Houston where I spent most of my childhood in 96 and finished college. And then I had a class with Hai Nguyen, who is, I guess, the co-owner of Elite. Yeah. And I think he just got his blue belt, and we became friends. He's like, you got to do jiu-jitsu. I was like, I want to. Where? And he's like, you should come to my school. And it was like the end of that semester, and the winter break came, and I didn't have his number. And I got to the point where I had like enough money or like a couple $100 maybe.
So hold on. When you said Hai Nguyen, I know that name because he
Elite.
Was one of the first students for Eric Williams, right?
Yeah,
now
exactly.
were they at the Westheimer location at that time, or where'd you grow up? Like,
well, when I was a kid,
yeah, when you were in Houston.
I lived in Fondren Airport area.
Okay,
in that part of Houston. But when I moved back, I was living in the Bel Air area.
Okay,
and I was going to U of H, and we had I don't remember what class it was, but we became friends. And he's like, "You should do jiu-jitsu, man." And I was like, "I want to." Winter break came. I didn't have his number. I looked with the phone book. Didn't have internet yet at my house or no smartphone. So there was a place right down the street from my apartment. I lived in this grimy $300 a month efficiency, and it was really like in a nice neighborhood, but next to a porno shop. So it was so cheap, and like the roof caved in when it rained, and it was covered in roaches. And actually, like day one, I found a joint in the room when I moved in there. So it was really grimy. So anyways, there was a karate school right down the street, and it had a jiu-jitsu banner. It was called Young Brothers Karate or Taekwondo or something like that. And I went in there, and I said, "Look, I want to do jiu-jitsu." And they're like, "Well, we only offer it once a month." I was like, I don't know. And I thought about it, and I was like, I'm not going to go there, you know, just for once a month. I was like, maybe I could do karate. And then I found another place, and it was not too far from me, and it was Saul Solis' school. And at the time, it was called Patum Wadi, which is a Thai name. I think it mean like flower blossom or something. It was named after Krupong's like school in Thailand or something like that. So I went there and I went right away and signed up. This was in December of '97, and the first day was crazy. I mean, literally had a boxing ring and heavy bags and no mats. Like, I want to do jiu-jitsu. They're like, cool, come in the ring. It's like, what are we doing? And it was guys with like a gi top and shorts and like maybe some wrestling shoes. They go, we're gonna roll. Like, what do you mean? Like spar? It's like, what? I haven't learned anything yet. Like, just do it. It's like, all right. It's like some dude got on my back and I just like body slammed him backwards. Like, oh, you can't do that. So that was like the only thing I learned, like day one. So it was like super unorganized and there wasn't a lot of teaching, and it would be like 10 guys in a boxing ring. It was canvas. So like if you didn't have wrestling shoes, your feet were just destroyed. But it grew quickly, and he got mats, and then we were able to actually kind of train. So it was I did everything in the beginning. I did a lot of the striking in the beginning and jiu-jitsu. But fast forward, like, I don't know, a year or two later, he brought in a guy from Sao Paulo named Ricardo Barros, who was a brown belt from High-End Gracie. And that was kind of my first taste of like technical gi jiu-jitsu. And I was like, man, I like this a lot. Before that, I already did like, it was like not even amateur. It was a tournament in Corpus Christi called Battle at the Beach. And it was, I entered the Vale Tudo, which was, you could do open hand strikes.
Really?
Yeah, so that was my first taste, and I won that tournament. It was just two fights in a day, and it was a trip because like I trained really hard for this. And that morning, if you guys didn't know Saul, rest in peace, Saul, he was this kind of crazy guy. And as I like met him at the gym at like 5 a.m. to drive to Corp, he's like, maybe you should just do the jiu-jitsu one. I was like, why? I've been training for the Vale Tudo, and I was like, I'm gonna do the Vale Tudo, and I was like, why is he telling me this? This is like such a mind. Can we cuss?
Yeah.
It's such like a mind fuck. Why would he be telling, like, making me second guess everything? Maybe he doesn't think I'm ready. But I did there. I went and did it and won it pretty easy. And that was my first tournament. And that was, I think, in '98. So fast forward back, Ricardo Barros came, and I had already had like I was probably like about a blue belt level. But literally there was only one black belt in Texas, and that was Machado. Like Eric was maybe a purple or brown, and Saul was just really a white belt. And so and this guy was a brown, and I was like, what is he? He's teaching us all this. This is really cool. So I kind of shift more toward jiu-jitsu at that point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then he was there for a while, and then I don't know where he ended up going to the Bay Area and eventually getting his black belt from Half Gracie, and he has a school somewhere in the Bay Area, Ricardo Barros. You can't miss him if you see him. When his head's shaved, he's got a giant Half Gracie tattoo on the back of his head. So yeah, a pretty wild dude. So Ricardo Barros, shout out to you, man. Fast forward like maybe a year after that, he brought in a guy named Silvio Braga, who was part of, it was called Gracie Baja Pitbull, which was kind of an affiliate of Gracie Baja. He was in a town outside of Rio called Teresópolis. And he came, and he was like very technical and like flashy. And that's who I got my blue belt from. And that was in 2002, I think. Wow. So he was there for a little while, and then Saul kicked him out. And then every time Saul would kick somebody out, I'd be the coach. And so I would help people. I was helping people like early on, you know. So I literally like paid for jiu-jitsu for like 3 months of my life, and that's it. I would just fall in and help the new guys, help clean, whatever. And he's like, hey, man, you're really doing good here. You don't have to pay. And I was like, thank God, because I would like make hamburger helper and stretch that out. That was like hurting, you know. So that was really awesome. And anyways, Silvio was here. I got my blue from him, and then he got bounced, so I was the coach again. And then I want to say in 2002, Tim Crater moved here. Big shout out to Tim Crater. He's in Lafayette, Louisiana, super OG, and one of my biggest mentors in part of my path in jiu-jitsu, and a great friend to this day. So he came, and he was a purple belt, and he just would, like, the guy was an animal, just pieced everybody up.
He was fun to watch.
I mean, you guys saw him in MMA, but like at that time, his sport jiu-jitsu was super good.
So Tim was under Rodrigo?
Yeah, so okay. Tim had a little bit on Tim. He he was from Louisiana, and he joined the Navy and ended up out in San Diego or L.A., and he ended up hooking up with, he started jiu-jitsu with Rodrigo. And Rodrigo came here, I believe, in 96 when Vitor Belfort came to fight in the UFC. So Rodrigo was with Vitor and Carlson, and they all lived in like a house together. In L.A. And then Rodrigo moved to San Diego and opened his gym that he still has to this day in San Diego. So Tim was there, and we really started building like a really good crew of jiu-jitsu guys. Right after Tim got there, I had already planned to go to Rio to go train with Silvio. And Tim's like, look, man, you go to Rio, I know you're going to go train with Silvio, but you should go to, we have an affiliate there. At that time, we already with BJJ Revolution through Tim to Rodrigo. Mm-hmm. But we have an affiliate there called Nova Geração, and the professor's name is Toko. And Tim had been there prior, and he sent me he gave me a Polaroid picture of him and Toko. I was like, okay, maybe I'll check it out. So I ended up in Rio. I stayed in Copacabana, and Silvio picked me up at the airport. I'm going to come back tomorrow, pick you up. He never showed up.
Oh, no.
He ended up in jail.
Oh, what?
Wow.
So here I am in Rio. Don't know anybody.
Yeah.
It was right at New Year's, so like everything was closed down for a while. I went to some gym within walking distance in Copa, trained with some brown belts, and then I want to go see this Toko guy. And I went there, and it was awesome. You know, that was my first taste of like a really good gym culture and a lot of black belts. And back then, seeing a black belt or getting to train with one was super, super rare. Yeah. You know, so
it was kind of rare when I started. Much less that time.
So this was like, it was December of 2002, and I stayed there for a few weeks. And I was like, all right, man, I'm all about Toko and Revolution Team, and you know. So
how was the training there? As far as like, I trained there in 2005, 2006.
It was good, man, and it was just good being around a lot of higher belts. But I mean, I did really well. I mean, even with some of the black belts, and it was kind of like, whoa, I tapped a black belt, and I was like, and he's Brazilian. But now I look back and I go, okay, I was very young and athletic and competing, and there's black belts that are just normal guys that have been training for a while. So it was some of those guys. But he had some monsters there, like Cyborg was a purple belt there who was just visiting. He hadn't moved to Rio yet. He was from South Brazil. And there was a guy named Pulga, Alexandre Pimentel, who's in Florida now and does really well competing in MMA. So he was there, and he was just a monster. And Michele Buyu is his name. He has a school in Colorado with Carlson Gracie. So a lot of those guys are still around and still friends. But it was pretty heavy training, you know. And I'd wake up, go to the morning class, train, go to the beach, chill out, take a nap, go back to the evening class, take a shower, go out at night, and just repeat. So living like the true jiu-jitsu lifestyle. And those, I went to Brazil.
How long were you there?
That time, like 3 weeks. So I've been 7 times from that first trip to went with my wife like in 13. But like those early days were so dope because really wasn't no internet and no one was really speaking English. So it was completely like just breathtaking to get away from the American culture and the busyness of the life that I was living at home and go there and just live like a true jiu-jitsu lifestyle. You know, and so it was awesome. So I came back after that first trip, and I was like, man, I'm all into this, you know, and just competing a lot. I would go there and do the adult worlds. I was still an adult and did the adult worlds a bunch down there, like blue, purple.
They call it the Mundials.
Yeah, the Mundials. Yeah, man. And it was you go there, and it was a place called Tijuca Tennis Club. And it was in a hood, basically, in a neighborhood called Tijuca. And it was like no English, and they didn't have like printouts, or you couldn't check on your the brackets were taped to the wall. And I remember just like walking up and seeing my name and seeing like 15 more pages. And that tournament was really tough because even at the lower belts, all the Brazilians had to qualify with the point system. They had to win, I think, the equivalent of nationals down there to even compete. But foreigners didn't; they could just go in. So it was really rare to see, like, even other Americans. Like, from Houston, I would see Took, I would see Alvis, and that was kind of it. Like, I wouldn't see, like,
so
hardly.
Took was down there as well.
Took lived there. Took lived there for, like, a year. If I remember correctly, he was with Alvis at Brown, and he moved there. Then he got his black belt from Gracie Barra from
When did he switch to
to a solo.
Hiberos? Yeah.
I really don't know for sure. He'd be a good one to have on too, because he's a couple years ahead of me. Like he got his black belt a few years before I did, but it seemed like when he came back, he switched, to Hibero, to
That's kind of the
Solos thing.
Same thing with Chad Robichaux. So I went with Chad, and I went with Alex Morano, Raymond Bell, and they were trying to keep Alex. Alex was a UFC star, and they tried to keep him there.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was white belt, and they just saw that. They saw something special out of him, so they tried to keep him. But Chad Robichaux was elite at the time.
I remember.
And then when we got back, he got with David Vieira and then Crazy Baja.
Yeah, I remember. Yep. I remember that. I've known Chad and all those guys for a while.
Yeah.
But, and I would just go back and forth. And then I ended up being the coach again at Saul's. He kicked him out. And at the time, Yves Edwards would come and train with us. And backtrack a little bit before that, Rico Rodriguez came in town for some underground like MMA promotion and fought, and him and Saul hooked up. And Saul was really like a genius of like how to teach people. He was good at good at everything, but really good at like understanding the cage and how to use the cage to pin guys, and like really smart high IQ coach for like MMA. So
he produced a lot of great guys, man.
So him and Rico like clicked real good, and then Rico brought like Tito and Kevin Randleman and Mark Kerr and who else? Mark Coleman. A lot of those guys came through in those early days, and I'd get to train with some of them. Like at the time, like Rico mostly, and Tito and Kevin Randleman. Mark Kerr, when he was there, usually Saul would like kick everybody out, and he'd want to do more like private training. So it was some really, really like crazy times in there.
When did Saul like get the idea to come up with the Renegades? I remember the Renegades way back.
So I helped him. It was funny because like in college, me and Hai did a project on how to create a MMA organization. And
see,
at that
this
time,
makes so much sense, man.
Check it out. At that time, I was a music promoter. So I was promoting concerts and stuff in clubs and numbers in the engine room. And eventually I opened Warehouse Live with some other friends or another friend. But already knew a lot. So like the professors were like so enthralled with like what I would do for a living. And so we created like the blueprint of it. And then Saul already wanted to do it. So Saul started Renegades. I don't remember the date, but probably like in 04, maybe 03. And it was in a hotel ballroom. And guys like Pete Spratt and a few other dudes fought in those first few, and then it went from that hotel ballroom to a club called City Streets, and then
were those sanctioned? Were they still doing open palm?
They were open palm, and then it went to the what's the theater downtown? It was called at the time the Verizon Wireless Theater. Clear Channel owned it. Now it maybe Bayou Place,
Bayou City.
I think it's changed names a few times. But he had his first closed fist fight probably around 05, 06.
Okay.
But it was I think it was sanctioned all along with the boxing commission, where it was open hand, and then he got the first closed fist.
Yeah, it seemed easier in Texas because boxing was heavy in Texas a long time ago. But so obviously your journey is like, it's so rich. Like I'm having a good time just listening to this. But what do you think the hardest phase, like not just belt level, but what was the hardest phase of your jiu-jitsu journey, do you think, looking back?
I mean, you got like hard in what way? So like it took me 4 years to get my blue belt because there's no one to promote,
Yeah.
Wow. Maybe even now as a black belt with the injuries and having to focus on a lot of different things, Purple was tough, but I mean they all had struggles, White to my favorites was white to blue, and then now at black, because white to blue, you go from knowing nothing to knowing quite a bit. And then it was so exciting because this was pre-internet, pre-YouTube. You had a couple of VHS tapes that were worth watching, the Henzo Gracie, Craig Kukuk, and there was like a couple of books and stuff out. But what you learned in class is what you learned. It was the gospel. And so it was really exciting. And it was a lot more of the tough guy sport back then. So moving on, so Saul had all those promotions, and eventually he built it up to in the Toyota Center, and then it stopped because there was a death of one of my students. Wow. And then he just got like, I'm done with this kind of thing. So a little before that, Saul he kicked out Tim, kicked out Eves, and it was just me again teaching, and that's fine. But like I had no training partners. He kicked out all my training partners, and then he closed the gym, and he was moving it to another place, and he moved it to this.
So was it down there? Was it close to downtown where those warehouses
no,
were?
it was on Naomi Street across from the Astrodome.
I remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I moved to Houston, I was looking for a place to train, and there wasn't very many. There was no place in Clear Lake.
Yeah.
And so I saw that Eve Edwards had a gym near 610.
Yeah, his was in the Woodlands, but eventually he opened one in the Woodlands. After everything kind of fell apart at Saul's, he opened his gym, which was called Third Column in the Woodlands. So Saul booted everybody except for me, and then he decided he closed for like a month, and then he reopened in this place called Ernesto and Co., which became like a small not Lifetime Fitness, 24-hour fitness, and we had to. Saul's gym was hardcore, right? Like you could train with no shirt, blasting music, and then it went to the super sterile place where we had to like in the aerobic room, we had to put the mats together real quick. We barely had enough time to train. No music and all that. I was like, this just sucks now. And I hit up Tim. Tim went with Eves to the Woodlands. I was like, bro, let's just rent a warehouse and just so we could train. Because like I was competing a lot. Tim was like competing and fighting MMA, and Eves was already in the UFC. So me and Tim started looking, and we found just a little shitty warehouse off of Pinemont. It was like $300 a month, same as my apartment. And that's it. And then Eves called me. He's like, Jeff, I heard you guys are opening a gym. I'd love to be a part of that. I'm like, yeah, dude, of course. So Eves closed his gym, brought his gear, and he had a handful of students. And it was me, Tim, Eves, and my friend AJ, Anthony Johnson, just one of our training partners. And he also fought MMA way back in the day and was
Anthony
striker.
Johnson?
Yeah, I don't not the UFC Anthony Johnson. But we opened this and had like a 4-way partnership kind of thing. It cost us just like three grand, like the mats, and so we didn't intend to make it a career. Like everyone had jobs except for Eves. Eves was the only like full-time fighter, and like I said, I was a promoter, and it blew up. You know, it became like our gym got really crowded quick. Wow. You know, fast forward a couple years, by the time I got my black belt, I was like really burnt out in the music scene. In the club scene. We just opened Warehouse Live, and you know that scene, you're out a lot late at night, and there's a lot of the people in that community are garbage for the most part. There's some good people that I still talk to this day, but it's a lot of vices, you know, a lot of drugs and alcohol that I'm not down with, and it was conflicting with who I was and who I was as a single dad and a martial artist trying to stay healthy, and I had to make a choice. Do I want to go further with this, or do I want to go all in and do jiu-jitsu for a living? So at that time, I was traveling. I had the gym on Pinemont, the First Revolution, but I was driving to Katy a lot. I was teaching Sage Northcutt and his whole family privates, like a lot. And I was like, why aren't you guys training? They didn't have a place to train. And at that time, it was called West Side Jiu-Jitsu, and Paul Thomas's gym. And he's like, we don't want to train there because that guy we don't like him. And I was hearing a lot of that, So I was like, man, Katy looks dope. There's one school and it's packed and everyone has complaints about it. And my son's about to enter junior high, and the junior highs and the heights are kind of like, he'd be the only white kid. And I don't want him to have to use jiu-jitsu to get to school every day. So it said houses in Katy are very affordable. Seems like a good place to open a gym. I said, screw it, let's do it. And I found a good place. It's where we are now. We had a CrossFit component to the gym at that time with one of my black. He's now a black belt. Chuck Jackson or Charles Jackson, one of my best friends. He had a CrossFit gym there. And before I even opened the doors, I had like 50 people signed up from the West Side gym. Oh wow! And then that gym just like went. You know, he got fired like pretty quickly. The stuff that was going on there, and then they've been a great feeder to help me succeed.
Who was teaching over there?
Well, it was Paul Thomas.
That was Paul at that time. Okay.
And then he got fired, and then they brought in Ted Stickle, and they became
I remember him.
They became a Gracie Baja, and then they fired Ted, and Ted has his own school still, and I don't even know who teaches over there anymore. But yeah,
I remember he came from Alaska.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So I opened the Katy Gym in 2009, and it's our HQ, our biggest gym, and that's where I'm at mostly. But we also have a gym in the Heights with Dinko, and we have a gym downtown with Jaime, and we have several affiliates. So that takes us to where we are today. And at 2009, 2010, that's been my full-time job. I've been very blessed to make a living and help a lot of people on and off the mats through it.
Definitely. The leader component is huge with you. I know my former business partner and I, we would come up with different scenarios that we just hadn't hit before, and we would call you like, hey man, like this is the situation we're having, and we loved your no nonsense. Like for us, when we have trouble with a parent or trouble with a student, or and we're unsure of what to do. We would just tell you what the problem is, and you'd have that like, hey man, dealt with this 100 times. That's what you got to do.
Yeah.
Just cut it loose.
Yeah.
And for us it was hard. But we learned how to do it from you. So
well, thank you. I mean, having done this for a while, I mean, I've seen at least 10, maybe 20,000 people through the doors. And then having like business experience and a professional career prior, and then military experience, it creates leadership qualities. So you know how to create the right culture in any organization, any business. You got to have a good product, but you need to have good culture. Yeah. And that's the key component of, I think, what makes us successful. Everyone important, safeguarding people, making sure the environment is healthy, not having the BS go around. And if it does, you need to clip it quickly. Yeah. And that's something that, not everybody is willing to do, but it will be at their demise if they don't.
Right.
So
you actually, you're afraid to lose a student, but then you realize once you say you cut the fat, if you will, and you realize that, man, now you're getting some more people back again that haven't been there, and it was that person.
Because that person
along.
was a cancer.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, and you see it at the highest level now, that some guys turn a blind eye to something going on. Before they know it, there's a huge controversy in the gym, So you've got to, being a leader, you have to make the decisions sometimes that no one wants to make, but you need to act quickly and clean house sometimes. And it's never fun kicking people out, but it's like like what you said, every time you do it, people come up and thank you. Mm-hmm. So, I like to give everybody a chance. Some things don't get a second chance, but it's just, some people are problems, and you can't pre-qualify every single person before they come in the gym, but you got to do your best to, especially if they're in a coaching or leadership position, to vet them and make sure that they're good people and will help continue the culture that you've created and you want to preserve.
Yeah,
love it. I agree. Jeff, you mentioned military. How does your military fit into the beauty of your jiu-jitsu career?
Well, it's helped me definitely. I've learned probably more leadership skills and time management and things like that through the military more than college, or anything like that. But I'm in the Army National Guard, so it's kind of a part-time military life, I've been in 12 and a half years. I had a 2-year break around COVID. So it's good. I've learned a lot through that about myself. It's hard training, especially at my age. Most people like at 30 are like, I'm too old for this to be jumping out of planes. And you don't even know yet, bro. Like, imagine doing jiu-jitsu for 29 years and then doing this. I'm 52, man. So it beats you up pretty good. But it when you're put in environments where you're dealing with like true, not misery, but being very uncomfortable with like food and sleep and environment and training in the rain and sleeping in the dirt and carrying heavy weight and stuff like that, it gets, shows you what you're made of, but then it makes everything else a little bit easier.
I think one thing that I see as far as like when I know my military career, 20 years, right? I find that I don't see in these new kids a sense of urgency or situational awareness. And I tend to use a lot of the same verbiage that I had in the military on the mats.
100%.
And I think that it's refreshing, but then it's frustrating as well. Mm-hmm. You have kids that are just like, I get it, your parents brought you here, but man, like let's kick it in gear. You got 1 hour with me. Let's do it. So, what would you say? Well, a little controversial. As far as veterans, military, joining the gym and seeing the benefits that it has, and also for law enforcement officers, you know, as far as cross collar jiu-jitsu and my partner Zach and I and Trent and Casey, what we seem to find is that veterans will tend to stay, right? They'll see the camaraderie and they'll do it. But we see that when the cops or law enforcement officers they'll come in, we see that they're usually the first one. So can you have you seen the same thing? And
For sure. I mean, I have police officers that have been with me like almost 20 years now, and those are the cops that you want out there. They're usually fit. They take their training serious. I think the standards for most police and law enforcement are very, very low, and I think that creates a cycle of low discipline on them. You know, their PT standards are pathetic. I don't think they have to requalify very often in PT. That's why you see all these cops that maybe were fit to get through the academy, which is way too easy, and they end up fat and stuff like that. So I think the cops, a lot of these guys don't want to put in the work. To their credit, their schedules can be really hard. You know, it's like shift work and working overnights a lot, and it changes a lot. So that's a legitimate thing. But they have, even within, I know HPD has a jiu-jitsu club, and it's free, and it's run by black belts now, and it hardly anybody takes advantage of it.
Yes.
So I think it's just the character of a lot of these guys that are officers. They don't have the discipline to stay with anything hard. You know, that's why you see them out of shape, and that's why you see them not in jiu-jitsu and probably not doing a lot of firearm training. And those are the cops that end up shooting people or getting taken advantage of by a teenage thug. You know?
Yeah.
So, where I think military, obviously the guys are usually out of the military, so they have the time. Most of them have the discipline from military life, and they're seeking a tribe. They're missing a mission, something to push forward and conquer, which jiu-jitsu gives you that mission, you know, whether it's to get better, get promoted, do tournaments, et cetera, et cetera. It gives you a plan to attack, right? And after the military, a lot of these guys are like, what now? You know, I'm used to having kind of a career path. I go from this rank to this rank or this school and that, and, you know, so jiu-jitsu fits in perfect for that.
Yeah.
That's why we have like that's how, you know, how I ended up getting in the military, because I had trained so many soldiers and Marines and stuff. And then I was like, man, I wish I'd be part of that. And I just did, you know.
Yeah.
But I think that's why. I think it's just a reflection of the culture of the police department and different agencies, that a lot of them are very lazy and low standards. And most good cops would agree with me.
Yeah.
Do you think that, just piggybacking on that, do you think that some of the cops, like, their ego get in the way? Because I've seen can you imagine you're a law enforcement officer, or you've been on the force for 10 years, you go into a jiu-jitsu place and then you kind of get smashed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, they're human, right? But when if you get pulled over or something, some cops are like, you know, they kind of make it where it's not a human touch, like, oh, hey, I'm going to write you the citation and you need to do that. They're kind of high on the ego. You think that maybe plays a factor?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that could be said with any man, you know, especially guys that think they're tough, guys that lift weights, are a little bigger. They come in and they get handled by a small person, sometimes even a female, you know, and it's like, whoa. I mean, that was me when I started. I was like 210. All I did was lift weights. I was a lot bigger and stronger than I am now. And I got wrecked by like dudes that if I saw on the street, I'd be like, better go on the other side of the street, you know?
Yeah.
But I was like, wow. If he can do it, I could do this, and I'll be a lot better than him.
Yeah.
I'm stronger, faster, and meaner. And sure enough, in a couple months, like no one was really tapping. Not many guys could like tap me anymore, you know. But that's like, you have to be humble, right? That's some guys don't have that, and they're just be like, this is not for me, and you know, making excuses, or I'd just shoot you, or if I could punch you, you know, and they decide it's not for them, because everyone, unless you come in with like, you know, a wrestling background or something, you're gonna be humbled by guys that you would never imagine. So I would agree with you, Trent, that maybe like some of these officers have a certain ego because of the position they're in over people. That might be a little harder for them to swallow their pride and be more humble.
Yeah.
I find two things, honestly, about that. Is that one, you need it more than ever. If you're an officer right now, you need it more than ever. One, because the climate right now, dealing with law enforcement and like the situations you're always seeing on YouTube, right? And then two, you're having I mean, as far as how many people come through my gym and then, they'll end up either moving or going somewhere or just quitting, right? Now you have a bunch of people, you've made a blue belt. They have a good sense of what they're doing now, and they have a decent ground game. Now imagine a cop who doesn't have any ground game, now having to work with somebody, because, I'm saying that any of my students now wouldn't get in trouble, right? But
they
previous students, So I would think that they need it more now than ever, being the fastest sport.
More now than ever. I mean, the likelihood that they're going to arrest a fighter is very low. Most people that are trained are more humble and stay out of trouble. Yep. But I mean, you got a lot of these criminals are more athletic and are more willing to raise the bar of escalation than the police officers. And you see it all the time, guys getting beat up and disarmed or taken advantage of by these cops, and it's like, they need to raise their standards. They should have mandatory jiu-jitsu and martial arts training and more firearm training and be better prepared. And then also it's just having the presence of command. If someone is fit and a little intimidating looking, they're less likely to have a confrontation with a criminal. Thugs and criminals want easy targets.
Right.
It's like I was always warned, you don't walk around there in Brazil by yourself and this and that. Man, I was everywhere by myself. And I'm trying to say like I'm all this and that, but like if you hold yourself in a certain way, people don't mess with you. Right. Usually those guys try to make friends with me. And it's the same thing. Like a strong cop doesn't have to act tough. He is. And he's going to demand respect. And that really should be said of every man. No matter if you're in uniform or not, or soldiers, the same way. You should look the part, regardless in and out of the uniform. And the black belt should look like a black belt and act like a black belt in and out of the gi.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's something that we all have to work on until the day we die.
Yeah, I'm the kind of guy like if I'm at a bar or something. Well, actually, I don't really go to bars, but if I was in a situation where somebody was wanting to fight me or they were drunk, honestly, I'd be like, look, let me just buy you a beer, man. Just relax.
100%.
Like I'm not down for this.
I got a question for you. Who would pick a fight with you? I mean, you're like 6'5". I would.
Man, with all these injuries I've had lately,
They don't know that, man.
Yeah.
I told this guy in his division, he's like, hey, what do you think I was like, dude, you don't have to do anything. You're 6'5", you're in the ultra heavyweight, and you're not fat. I promise you, they're scared of you right now. He's like, you think so? I was like, I know so. These guys are overweight, and like they don't.
Yeah.
You look like a killer. I mean,
man.
I need to get back in it.
So Jeff, what do you think, in your experience, in your opinion, you have great background in jiu-jitsu, military. How can we bring more law enforcement into that fold and help keep them, help nurture that that pride, really,
before they quit?
Before they quit, yeah.
I mean, I think it comes from within, like, their peer group, Usually that's with anything, Our main way we get people in is referrals. You get hyped up on jiu-jitsu, you want to bring people. So, you need to have people in leadership positions that do jiu-jitsu that will influence the others, if not demand the others to do it. I mean, the Army has a combatives program, and you can go through all the levels and really not know much. Yeah. And you got a week of it in boot camp, and some depending on what your job is in the Army, you might not even get any in boot camp, or you might get a day. But then people leave it. It's just enough to get a taste, but then it's on you to follow up and get more training, right? So it's not a part of the day in, day out training. And it should be, I don't know about the police academy, but I think they have a very little block of instruction on self-defense. But it should be a mandatory weekly thing where their lives depend on it day in and day out.
I agree.
So I think it comes from the top down, and then it comes from the peers bringing others in. Not only for their peace of mind, but just like what the average person gets out of it, stress relief and the health benefits and the friendships, the culture, all that will benefit a cop just like it does anyone else, and they probably need it more. They need that decompression more than anybody. But we all benefit no matter what you do day to day. Everyone benefits from that peace of mind of knowing how to protect yourself and just being around others to where you can decompress at the end of the day and train and just forget about your daily problems.
Yeah.
So
one thing I think is cool is, I see, so I subscribe. See, you've got an app, you got instructionals going on. you're heavy in social media right now. You've got a lot of different React videos. You've got instructional videos. Being the at headquarters, Revolution Dojo, how would you say that that's impacted where you're at, where you were, and where you're at now?
Honestly, who I am on Instagram or YouTube is who I am everywhere. Like, you got a lot of, I know people that have way more followers than me that put on a fake personality, and you see them in real life and they're super insecure and quiet and don't say hi to anybody, or they're not who they are. And who I am on those videos is who I am now, and I'm going to be, like, no matter who I'm talking to. It hasn't changed anything. It's just me filming what I normally do for a living. It really doesn't bring in people. It might help get sponsors and help me connect with other people across the world, and maybe help people like learn jiu-jitsu or just advice on different stuff. But it hasn't really changed anything, and I really don't spend much time doing it.
We've taken your advice, as a matter of fact. I've seen some of your videos, and I've, like I said, my former business partner, he would send me one and said, look what he said, and it was like, man, that's what we're going through right now.
I'm sharing my experiences and what I do, and having done this for a while with other people like yourself, or guys that are just getting started, to guys that are running businesses, and like these are things that have helped me. Maybe it will help you, or these are things I want to address that I don't like. And I'm going to speak out on them. Or here's a cool technique.
And it's refreshing too. Let me tell you, everyone's always scared. Like I'll even be honest. I was scared to have any kind of opinion, owning a gym. Like, oh, well, what if they don't like that? And it's refreshing to see someone say, I'm me, and this is what you're going to get every single time. And, like, sometimes I'll watch one of your videos, and I'm like, damn, he said that, And so that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really posted anything that I've regretted.
Yeah.
And
I like it when the grill comes in. I know something good's coming.
When I put the grill in, it's usually I'm gonna hurt some feelings.
I'm just sitting there and I'm going like, and he's like, the grill's in. I'm about to talk some. You know what? I'm like, okay, like this is good. This is good. I think that's what he means. But so while we got you here, I got a question. With that being said, because you're not afraid to voice your opinion, we know you're genuine. I mean, that's so. What do you think the biggest problem there is in the jiu-jitsu culture right now, like as a whole?
I mean,
I know you spoke on it, but
we can attack that from a lot of different points. And I think the biggest problem in jiu-jitsu is the same biggest problems that are in the world. I think jiu-jitsu is a reflection of what everything else is. Jiu-jitsu as a sport, I think has changed a lot, where we've lost a lot of the applicability to real life fighting. It used to be like several of us here fought MMA, and it was just like part of being a black belt. You were going to fight MMA, or at least train it. But like, I was not going to be a black belt without fighting professional MMA. That was my own standards. I had to go to Brazil and compete. I had to win at every belt. I had to fight MMA. I didn't want to be promoted, and I got promoted on the podium. So I didn't, and that's what I want. I never made Rodrigo know that, and I think his only promotion on the podium.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And those were just like my own goals, my own standards. And then I have standards for my guys. They don't have to do my standards, but there's certain things that we need to check. But so I think jiu-jitsu is, and I like sport jiu-jitsu probably more than anything. I wouldn't do a pure self-defense style of jiu-jitsu, because some guys take that extreme to the left on that, where it's just choreographed kata type stuff, and they're not really getting punched in the face. Where I make my guys, sometimes, we will bring out the gloves or open hand fight, and you're going to know what it's like to get punched in the gym while you're doing jiu-jitsu. And then when my guys get promoted to a black belt, I'm making a lot of these guys now fight in smokers prior, and a lot of our guys did. And then if they're not doing that, maybe they're too old, they're going to get a taste of it before they get the black belt.
That reminds me.
I just went there. I just went
to the smoker. Yeah.
Man.
Do you realize my first introduction to Westheimer Elite, 4-ounce gloves, no headgear. I fought. It was basically a smoker. My first day, I fought Ray Blodgett in the cage, and instead of having him for the second round, when I went back in, it was Jason Solis.
Yeah,
MMA, And so that was my.
That's a hell of a first
I
day,
was
man.
so right. Because Ray Blodgett was my MMA coach. He ended up being my MMA coach.
Ray trained with me for a while in my school. He was a student.
Ray had a lot of pro. I think he had over 20 pro fights.
Yeah, I don't know, but
he fought a lot of good people too, and he was really good. He was really knowledgeable, but. Like, that just goes to show you, I didn't know anything about jiu-jitsu. I didn't know how the belts. I thought you went in there, evaluated, and they would say, I think you're a blue. I think that's how ignorant I was. I did not know, no matter what I went through that first day, they're going to give me a white belt anyway.
Yeah.
So, but that was my introduction.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that the direction of jiu-jitsu is kind of a problem. I think the popularity of jiu-jitsu is great, but it's watered down. You know, the highest level for sure is better than it's ever been, but the average is worse than it's ever been. You got guys that have black belts that have schools that should be blue belt students in other places because you get this cycle of shit, basically. You give a guy a black belt that shouldn't get his. What does he do? His standards are going to be higher or lower. He's going to give, and that's what happened with probably what happened with karate and everything. And you've got all these people that have black belts for being nice guys or just checking the attendance block or I want to open an affiliate, so we'll fast track you to black belt. A lot of guys that really poor in knowledge and ability, and that right there is what there's too many freaking black belts now that don't deserve it. And
you said it right there. I mean,
you have in my school, you don't. I'm not saying you have to compete, but if you're gonna get a black belt, you have to compete. Otherwise, jiu-jitsu is for everyone, but being a black belt isn't.
Yeah,
and it's just not right. Now, of course, if you have some serious injury, or that's a different scenario, right? Like if you physically can't compete and you need to compensate then with the knowledge.
Yeah.
Like the most famous coach right now, and has probably the highest jiu-jitsu IQ, John Donaher.
Yeah.
As far as I know, he's never competed and never fought. I heard he was really, really tough on the mats, but I know he can't do any of that now, and he's never competed. 100% he deserves a black belt. He has like genius level teaching ability. So there's the outliers like that, right?
Yeah.
So you need to, if you can't compete because you're just disabled basically, then you need to have a very high knowledge and you need to have good character.
Yeah.
You know, all that's important. And if people like some of my videos disagree, well, fine. You'll easily find a school, and if that's your whole goal is to get a black belt. And you know what happens to those guys that get the black belts like that? They quit.
Yeah.
They quit. You know,
Get tested.
or they won't get tested.
Folks, you're gonna get the raw truths from Jeff Messina.
You got
here.
that, and then so that was the second thing that I said about the jiu-jitsu, that it's deviated away from applicability, it's getting watered down, and then third, like anyone, like with social media, everyone's an expert now.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of these people just need to shut the fuck up and fall in line, you know? And that's a problem. Social media has become a problem. You got these girls rolling around in bikinis and sexualizing jiu-jitsu that are making careers out of it. And that's just kind of fucked, you know? Like, it was, in Portuguese, it's casca grossa, tough guy. And that was the era I came up in. And there was girls that trained. They were tough. But it was different culture. And society's different culture. You know, rappers are wearing dresses now.
Yeah.
Hip hop I came from. You want to go listen to the first NWA album? You're gonna have like the woke culture will not be able to get through that album. You know what I mean? And that's just kind of like jiu-jitsu's kind of gotten woke, and that right there, I don't like. You know, I don't say it has to be.
I know that's a big subject. We could do a whole podcast just probably on that, but
like I said, it's just a reflection of society. You know, so I think those are 3 points that I think is what's wrong with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So we have to keep it real and do it our way. So sometimes I'll get frustrated. I can't believe this guy has a school, or who cares? At the end of the day, I go, who really cares? Like, does it affect me? No. I have a lot of students that agree with me, and that's all I need to be concerned about is my world and my culture and my environment, that I can help others that want to be helped and fall in line with what I believe in.
Yeah.
You know? And that's my mission, you know, help like-minded people on and off the mat, become better people, and to pay it forward, you know?
yeah.
And if you're one of I get guys that quit all the time after promotions, so they didn't get promoted. You know, it's like, oh, well, you know.
Yeah. Not going to water it down just for that. Can't make everybody happy.
No.
But speaking of like you competing at the highest level and being one of the first with your professor promoting you on the podium, what can you say as far as like what has competing taught you that regular training has not?
The preparation, the gains is in the preparation. So the outcome is important, but it really doesn't affect your growth in a sense. Like, so when the people that compete typically are the better guys, because you're going to be training with a different sense of purpose. You're going to be training harder. You should be thinking really about like what you're good at, what you're not good at. So it's a big reflection on where you're at. And the preparation, you should be eating better, doing outside exercises better, getting healthier, getting stronger. And then I think what competing does is putting you in an uncomfortable environment, putting yourself through some hardship and going out there doing something that everyone is nervous to do. And that's what separates a lot of successful people and unsuccessful people, is you're willing to take risks and go out there and put yourself on the line, win or lose. And then when you don't do good, you have to make a choice. Do I quit and be a loser and just give up every time things don't work out my way, or do I like brush it off and learn from it? It sucks to lose, but no one goes undefeated in anything. I mean, there's been a few boxers and stuff, but they just, a couple MMA fighters for sure. But in jiu-jitsu, you're gonna lose, and I think that's one of the bigger lessons. Is it's a common thing, being comfortable, being uncomfortable. I think that's like a huge lesson that jiu-jitsu gives. That makes you successful in all aspects of life. It gives you a taste of failure, like frequently, and
If you can master that,
and you have to like learn to embrace that failure. And jiu-jitsu is going to give you failures and rewards, and that's life, man.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head when you were saying the competitors and the lifestyle, the eating, everything. We have Casey Tom over at Cross Collar, and
He's an animal.
Man, he's an animal. He eats perfect.
Look at the guy. He's freaking like shredded, and he's doing really well.
You can see his purpose the whole time.
Yeah.
It is refreshing.
It is. I high respect to him, man. And so I think that's, you don't have to, but the people that hate to do it the most are probably the ones that need to do it more.
Yeah.
So that's what I think that you get out of competing.
Jeff, was there any time in, you lost a lot of training partners in your early, career, getting kicked out? I mean, you stayed around, but was there ever a moment that you were just like, I don't think I want to continue this?
No, never. Like I want to train. Like I love training and rolling. I don't train near as much as I used to, but there was times where I'd get frustrated with business, but never with jiu-jitsu. Never. Like if if one day I get out of the business of it, I still want to train with my friends. So the sport of it, I love tremendously, or the martial art of it, I'll never want to stop. And it's intriguing to me, and it's so much fun. Running the business side of it, you see the ugly side of people. People that quit all the time against, like, they sign up for an agreement, but they quit. People like changing their cards and leaving bad reviews and things like that are a bummer, So that can be frustrating, but I feel so lucky and so blessed to be able to make a good living and help others. I've helped other guys create livelihoods by opening gyms and doing what they love to do. I would pay to do jiu-jitsu if I had to, but I don't. I get to make a living doing my favorite thing to do. That's awesome. And I've all my best friends and even my wife and everyone that's important to me, mostly have been from, through my path through jiu-jitsu and in the military too, but most of those guys do jiu-jitsu too, the ones that I'm closest with, So I've never really thought about quitting. There's a lot of frustrations and injuries, but, as you get older, you get injured just living life, So, we're all up here. We're all here, like, had some injuries, but we typically look better and can outperform men our age in anything in life, And it is kind of a fountain of youth. You're surrounded by younger and older people, and it just keeps you connected, with a wide variety of cultures and people, there's a wide variety of people in the gym, and typically the people will stay with it no matter what their ethnicity or religious beliefs are. The people that stick with it are just usually good people.
Yeah.
Good ethical people, just smart people, successful people. Like guys that make it are usually successful in their civilian career, their outside careers, and then typically happily married and, more well-rounded,
Yeah.
So anything that's hard, it's going to pressure test people, and the people that can hang are usually have those qualities of the type of people I like to be around or help get them there.
Yeah, I would say for me, I've always been told, if you want to be a millionaire, hang out with 5 millionaires. If you want to do this, hang out with 5 people. And I would say if you want to be a good person, find a jiu-jitsu gym. You're going to have more than 5 people that and you're going to have successful people in there. That I would recommend that you go to a jiu-jitsu gym, find some of the people that have been there the longest, and friend them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. So that being said, man, we really loved having you here. This has been fantastic for us. Not to fanboy, but let me tell you how I met you. I was with Jared Chafee over at Carlson Gracie on the north side of town, and he said, we're doing a Jeff Messina seminar. And I was like, yeah, I'll definitely be there, And I didn't know who you were just yet. And I went over there, and you taught some stuff, and I think I called like 15 people. I was like, dude, my mind is blown, man. This is insane. So from then on, I've always been that little fanboy. Like, hey, man, I gotta somehow find out where he's training, what he's doing. And so we really appreciate having you here.
My pleasure.
So that being said, do you have anything that you want to say before we close?
No, guys, just if you're not training, find a gym that's, find one of our Revolution team gyms, but like really just find a good gym in your area and get started. And you guys that quit, I don't know anyone who doesn't regret quitting.
Yep.
Or as a parent, the kid's never going to thank you when they're an adult for letting them quit, So guys, don't give up. Doesn't mean you have to be like this high level competitor, just get in there and push yourself and just learn and enjoy it. Enjoy the process. Don't feel like I've got to get to this belt or I've got to be better than everybody. If you enjoy it, you're going to get good. And that's it, it's an honor to be here, and whatever I can do to help fight for the front line, it's a great thing you guys are doing here.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Jeff.
Well, guys, we really appreciate you guys tuning in. We're going to get another guest here soon, and be looking out for that. Also, be looking out for merch drop coming down. We're going to have rash guards and the gi right here. All proceeds, 100% of the profits will go into paying for veterans and law enforcement agents to get themselves into a jiu-jitsu gym. If you are a veteran or a law enforcement officer and you're looking to start some jiu-jitsu, I highly recommend it. Get on our website, sign up. If you're a gym owner and you want your gym to participate, sign up. Same thing. Get on the website, sign up, and we'd love to come out there. Professor Trent and I would come out and maybe do a seminar, introduce ourselves, tell you what we're about, and then get you started. So again, thank you very much, and you guys have a great evening.